This podcast episode is brought to you by Coors Light. These days, everything is go, go, go. It's nonstop hustle all the time. Work, friends, family expect you to be on 24/7. Well, sometimes you just need to reach for a Coors Light because it's made to chill. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged. It's as crisp and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies. It is literally made to chill. Coors Light is the one I choose when I need to unwind. So when you want to hit reset, reach for the beer that's made to chill. Get Coors Light in the new look delivered straight to your door with Drizzly or Instacart. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
Welcome back to Short Shifts. I'm your host, Ben Burnett. Joining me, as always, my pal and yours, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my friend, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I feel like a Chris Kreider, like I am capable of putting together hat tricks in back-to-back weeks after being a real drag on the lineup for a while. I'm feeling good.
You feel like you were a drag on the lineup for a while? Why?
I don't know. This is a terrible metaphor. I'm just riding high off of another great night of Chris Kreider action on my cupful team. That's all.
Okay. For what it's worth, I'd compare you to like an Austin Matthews type who's always on.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot there. I appreciate that.
Well, folks, let's get into the show. Welcome to another episode of Short Shifts. Of course, we are brought to you by Keeping Karlsson on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Short Shifts is the twice weekly check-in between those massive Sunday evening episodes of Keeping Karlsson, keeping you up to date with fantasy news, takes, and analysis. If there's a player we don't talk about tonight, of course, you should message us on Twitter at ShortShiftsKK, or join the Keeping Karlsson patron Discord group at keepingkarlsson.com/patron. So, Louis, let's get into our headlines. And this one is kind of just a callback to our Wednesday show. I wanted to mention that Sidney Crosby back from the COVID list, so I would assume that means he was not afflicted with the virus, which is always good. And he started tonight's game between Gensel and Rust. So that's a good thing to see, I think, for all Crosby, Gensel, Rust owners. Maybe not ideal for Malkin owners, although it's Malkin who has a point so far already tonight, playing with McCann and Kapanen, who we mentioned on Tuesday. Kasperi Kapanen looked pretty good in Crosby's spot on Power Play 1. I'd be a little bit disappointed as a Kapanen owner, but it's nice to see him still on Power Play 2, Line 2. And, 5 points in 5 games is nothing to sneeze at. Louis, do you think he's a hold right now?
Yeah, I think obviously he's playing alongside Malkin, which is always a good spot. I would definitely rather have him than McCann. He's showed us some good scoring acumen so far this year, freed up a little bit from whatever was going on with him in Toronto. Yeah, I think you hold on to him and see kind of how things shake out. Yeah, that Power Play 2 is not quite as appealing, but, the Power Play 1 has been so-so this season anyway. So yeah, I think I'm pretty interested in ride this hot streak at least while, like you said, 5 points in 5 games. And as you mentioned as well, great to see Crosby back. Nice to see him do a quick bounce back off of that COVID list when there were fears, of course, that it could be as much as 2 weeks. So, it's always kind of roulette. Don't make any rash decisions. Obviously, you're not making rash decisions with Crosby, but anybody who goes on that COVID list, it's useful to see how long they're going to be out there, unless they are one of those, bubble wire players. You don't let them go until you find out exactly how long they're going to be gone for.
And I think that the most useful piece of, or another piece of news related to COVID is we did see Joel Farabee hit the COVID list today. So he missed the game between Philly and Pittsburgh. No word yet on why he missed why he's on the list. And as we've seen with Crosby, it could be nothing. So don't go dropping one of the hottest players in the league right now just because they hit the COVID list, assuming, they're going to be out for 2 weeks. Hopefully it's the same deal. He's okay, and they're just waiting on another test, or, he had close contact. We don't know with this virus, right? So don't freak out. Hold on to Joel Farabee until we know a little bit more.
Interesting, though, to see in his absence the Giroux line really pick things up, where, it has been that Farabee and JVR line that's been so hot. Tonight it was the Giroux line. Giroux with 2 goals and an assist.
Yeah, that's I think something that Philly really needs is not to have to rely on one line, and I think we saw that. I mentioned this the other night, I believe, about how Philly has the talent to roll those three lines. I wasn't going to talk about this, but I didn't think to mention this earlier, but nice to see Travis Konechny get in on that. He had a couple of assists as well, so yeah, good night for some Philly slumpers to break out of it. Let's jump in now to the injuries portion of our show. And we have to start with a bit of a backbreaker here. Lewis, why don't you start us off in New Jersey?
Oh boy, yeah, this was a nasty one. Nico Hischier is out week to week with a broken bone in his face after a puck hit him in the visor. I don't even want to talk about it. It sounds really unpleasant. He's on concussion protocol as well. So just, pretty concerning, I think, this injury to Hischier. So, we don't have that many weeks left. He hasn't been, he's been putting up a little bit here and there, but been kind of a disappointing season for him. The results are we might see Pavel Zacha as the line one center with Kyle Palmieri and Miles Wood. And then we saw Jack Hughes line up with Sharon Govich and Kuokkanen. We saw Jesper Bratt banished down to line 4, and we saw Nikita Gusev healthy scratch. So just a whole bunch of moving and shaking going on these New Jersey lines, and the end result was not especially pretty as they were on the receiving end of that Chris Kreider hat trick as the New York Rangers waltzed away with it.
Yeah, I think, though, with these New Jersey lines, they're just so... I think that Lindy Ruff basically tried to reshuffle the deck here, and he's kind of just looking for whatever's working, and that's the vibe I'm getting from the Devils power play and the Devils line so far, is they just really haven't found anything that works for them. So I think it makes sense to give Zacha a turn on line 1 here where he's been hot, although I think that tonight may be his, there it is, the final 6-1. So this may be his second game in a row without a point, which isn't great. Definitely a little bit bothered to see that Mackenzie Blackwood has now gone 4 games without with giving up 3 or 4 goals. Definitely not used to seeing him struggle to this point, to this degree. I'm not getting too freaked out by the Devils. I'm expecting, with a young team like this, that they're going to have hiccups. They're going to have to reset. I remember a few weeks ago, everyone was talking about how the Rangers were terrible, and I thought that was a little bit overblown, and now everyone's talking about how the Rangers are elite, and I think that's a little bit overblown, and I think it's sort of the same thing with the Devils. They're not as terrible as they look right now. They're going to come out with some adjusted lines, and they're going to figure something out at some point. They're kind of becoming the Nashville Predators version of that team who has to figure out their power play a little bit right now. And so I'm hoping that Ty Smith can be that guy, and that we see some good stuff out of the Devils moving forward. So
yeah, if we can see some sanity emerge from the discombobulation that they're running out there, if they find something that works for them for a game or two here and can maybe stick with it, hopefully we can progress towards something a little more logical and effective.
And so next up, we'll head over to Colorado, where Nathan MacKinnon was injured last night with a hit to the head by Joachim Blichfield. I don't know how to say his name. The NHL is reviewing the hit. In his absence, Nazem Kadri headed up to the top line. Andrei Burakovsky hit that top power play. But Bednar did say he seemed okay in the post game. So I'm kind of just bringing this up because if you're listening to this on Friday, the Avs have a pretty decent schedule. They play an off night here, and then they also have the Streamagami next week. So I would monitor the situation. If Mac has some problems, concussion symptoms sometimes come up later. So maybe Burakovsky, somebody you could get off the wire.
Yeah, and Burakovsky is on a little bit of a hot streak of his own, especially after he got a little, Ben negged him into this success here. We gave him a cold streak, and even independent from that elevated deployment, he had 4 points in 4 games before Wednesday's game where he did not score, but he did have 18 minutes with 4 on the power play and took 4 shots. But what that might mean is that even without McKinnon's absence, if he does indeed make it back after this next game, Burakovsky may still be worth a look, especially as you said with this nice schedule coming up. He was producing, in those 14 and 15 minute games that he was getting the last few, even though he wasn't able to manage a point once he was elevated to that top line.
All right, and another ouchery here. We have Connor Garland back, and in his first game, he had an assist versus the Kings. With him back, I would have expected the Schmaltz, Garland, and Keller line to get reunited, but instead, Phil Kessel, who Brian and Elon talked about the other night, stays up on that top line, while Clayton Keller moves down to line 2 with Christian Dvorak and Pitlick. I kind of like that move just to give Christian Dvorak a little bit of help. He's been cold, and it's nice to see a little bit of help for him down there. And then finally, we have Matt Grzelcyk coming back onto the top power play in Boston. They only had one shift of the power play one. There were a lot of 4-on-4 in that game on Wednesday night. So I will look. I'm keeping him on my IR. Stashing him there just to kind of see what happens, and if he shows that he can be productive in that spot, I would like to see him shoot more. Torrey Krug at least supplanted some of his off periods by putting up shots and blocking a little bit. Grzelcyk hasn't really been that back end guy, and you'd like to see a little bit more peripheral action from a defenseman, especially since Grzelcyk has not shown that he's going to be an elite point producer. So he's got to do something if he's going to stick on your roster. Lewis, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some streaky players. You're listening to Short Shifts.
The economy is made up of real people doing real stuff, and it affects everything, which you obviously know since you're a real person doing real stuff. Marketplace is here to help you get smart about everything beyond the what of the day's business and economic news. We dig into the how and the why with the real people driving our economy. From big tech and interest rates to small businesses and what's happening at the Fed, Marketplace breaks it all down so you don't have to. Listen to Marketplace wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's Ben from Short Shifts. I want to tell you about Blue Wire Hustle. That's a brand new program where you can host your very own podcast here on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Hustle was created to give everyone the opportunity to take your podcast to the next level. Or if you want to host a podcast and just don't know where to start, Hustle is the perfect place for you. As part of the program, you'll receive personal cover art, Q&As with Blue Wire's top podcasters, access to the community Discord, and an e-learning course full of tips and tricks. And on top of that, we'll help you get your show pushed out to Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and all the other listening platforms. And the best part is you can get all of this for just $15 a month, the same rate as any other hosting site would charge you just for the initial setup. So whether you're starting from scratch or have an existing show that you're looking to grow, Hustle's an open door to leveling up your sports podcasting experience. Acceptance into the program is limited, so get your application in today. To apply, go to bwhustle.com/join. Check out the description box for this episode to find out more, but that's bwhustle.com/join. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Lewis, you're going to start us off with a cold streak. No, you're going to start us off with a hot streak. Bring in the posy vibes. Why don't you start us off here?
Absolutely. I want to go to St. Louis and talk about Zach Sanford and this just outstanding run he has had over the last 3 games. Sanford has been kind of a useful plug up and down the line, and he's been on a pretty good power play too. Just been on an absolute tear lately, though, scoring 6 of his 10 points in the last 3 games while lined up with Ryan O'Reilly and Kyrou. He's had 3, 6, and 3 shots in those games while averaging a hair over 1.5 shots a game in his other 19 thus far. Despite this shooting binge, he's not going to keep shooting 33% as he has been since being elevated to that Ryan O'Reilly line. I grabbed him before last night's game, and I definitely recommend picking him up short term, but watch for a drop in shots or relegation to line 3 because you don't want to be holding on to him when he is back to his 4 points over 19 games pace. And that could be sooner rather than later because we do have Vladimir Tarasenko, who is at some point going to make his return to the lineup. And Sanford definitely sees like the odd man out. So this is a short-term only move here.
I'm with you there. I guess, it's one of those things. You're watching the lines, right? If he sticks, then you're able to kind of hold on. But yeah, definitely he's a hold for now with how hot he's been. And I'm jealous of a league mate of mine in a deeper league that grabbed him this morning while he was top of my watch list, and now I'm picking through the dregs, that's for sure. We are going to hop on over to Toronto, where Zach Hyman has 5 points in his last 4. Hyman has become one of the most added players on Yahoo this week, which I noticed that most of the time when someone's getting added a ton, it's because they're like in the 25 or fewer percent owned. Zach Hyman's 64% owned, and he's still among the most added players on Yahoo. So obviously he's on a bit of a heater here. On the season, he's pacing for 56 points. That's just below last year's totals. And I will mention that Toronto's game Tuesday night has not begun as we get into this. He's been productive on a second power play unit in Toronto that's looked pretty good this year after we all kind of freaked out over Sheldon Keefe splitting up Tavares and Nylander from the main group on the top unit. There are a few things that make me pretty certain that Hyman's not suddenly turning into an 80-point guy. You know, you have Thornton reestablished on line 1. You have an on-ice shooting percentage that's just a bit high, but the other underlyings look okay. And so I'm feeling very comfortable saying that like that 56-point pace is pretty sustainable, which makes him super rosterable in bangers leagues. Despite the recent hot streak, though, that, you know, he's a third line player, so it's going to be tough for him to hit much higher of a peak this season. But I'm very impressed with Zach Hyman. I hope the Leafs bring him back next year because he just seems like a really fun spark plug on a team with a lot of superstar talent, and you could see him kind of being that like Patrick Hornquist type, surrounded by the Sid and Malkin types who are putting up all the points. So Zach Hyman, if he's available in your Bangers League, go out and get him.
Yeah, right on. Michigan guy too. Sticking with Bangers Leagues, we got to talk about another guy who is definitely another, one of our short-term must-adds in any league that's counting those banger categories, and that's Marcus Foligno, which is not anything that I expected to be saying. He is on fire lately, much more out of nowhere than Zach Sanford. Foligno's got 8 points in his last 6 games. Those 6 games make up 75% of his points on the season. He's mostly been playing with Parise, although with Parise scratched last game, he was on the awesomely named Bonino-Foligno line. Unfortunately, Nick did not assist on Marcus's goal, or else I would have been spending all my time scouring the internet for the Harnarian saying Foligno, Bonino, Foligno broadcast call. It would have been outstanding.
Maybe it's good then that didn't happen, so you could prep the show for us.
That's right. I'm not going to recommend picking up a guy who's seeing fewer than 15 minutes most nights and shooting 63% on 8 shots during this run and is not seeing power play time. He's not going to be useful in a lot of leagues, but he is a nice addition in a Bangers League. He's got 11 penalty minutes and 13 hits over that 6-game scoring binge too. So he's giving you a lot of category coverage. Just keep in mind, there's not really anything in his numbers to suggest that he can keep up this torrid scoring pace.
All right, and I'm going to take our final hot streak of the week, and that is Brett Pesce, a name who I honestly, if you had asked me preseason, 10-1, or like, I don't even know what the odds would have to be for me to take it, but like that we would talk about Brett Pesce this year. Anyway, of course, 5 points in his last 6, although I don't believe he pointed tonight, so make that 5 and 7. Has made Pesce suddenly the he's the third most added D-man on Yahoo, behind Nick Leddy and Matthias Ekholm. On pace for 48 points this year, which is a huge upgrade. That would make Brett Pesce kind of like a Mikhail Sergachev or like a Matt Dumba type, which does not at all fit the profile. I mean, I'm sure that we may have some listeners who don't, and I know that most of our listeners do, but I wouldn't be shocked if we have a listener who's like, who is Brett Pesce? And so he does put up decent shots and blocks. And in general, as we've talked about a lot this year, you got to ride hot streaks. And on defense, sometimes there's just no one appealing on the waiver wire, right? And so I'm sure that that's where a lot of these Brett Pesce ads are coming from. People who are desperate for some production out of the back end. I get it. But as soon as he goes cold, and he now has gone pointless in 2, this is somebody you can let go. The underlyings are unsustainable. He doesn't get meaningful power play time. I mentioned Nick Leddy and Matthias Ekholm earlier. I'd rather have either of them. Leddy looking just fine on that power play 2 in New York. And Matthias Ekholm, who we mentioned on Tuesday at taking over for Ryan Ellis, has another goal tonight. So if he's available, go out and grab Matthias Ekholm. That is what I kind of want to impress here.
Yeah, I think that's the real takeaway. I know we started this talking about Pesce, but Ekholm has 6 points in the last 4 games, and his current game against Florida isn't over. He is averaging over 4 shots a game. This dude is obviously getting this marquee spotlight time to try to move him out of Nashville. Take advantage. Get while the getting is good. He is only 24% rostered across Yahoo, but that number is climbing. Jump on that guy.
Oh, I didn't even notice he also got an assist on the field goal. Life is good.
Yeah, outstanding.
All right, Lewis, I believe you have a cold streak for us.
Yeah, just a cold streak here. Alex Iafallo, who has just been really exciting out in LA, at least for a little while here. You know, this is a guy who hasn't had a ton of change in deployment. The only thing that kind of stood out was that he had no power play time versus St. Louis, but it looked like it was the case of another penalty quickly evening things up. You know, the big issue here seems to be shots. He's had fewer than 2 a game for this 5-game slide when he's averaged about 2.5 shots a game for the season. And what's interesting is he has no shots in the last 3 games versus Minnesota. Those are his only shotless games of the season. You know, I don't know if they're giving him different responsibilities or what there. I'm not sure what we can do with him besides hold on. If you liked Iafallo when he was scoring, he's doing most of the same stuff with a little dip in shooting. He's seeing the same deployment. You know, the Kings don't see the Wild again until April. So my feeling is you just grin and bear it if you liked Iafallo before, because I think he's giving you most of the same stuff, and hopefully he'll start seeing the bounces go his way.
Yeah, I think the thing with Iafallo is, like, if you're in a deep league, you got to hold on, right? Because you're not going to find too many line 1 power play 1 players on the wire. I think what we're really seeing is, and this is something we kind of said when we were talking about players like Adrian Kempe and Dustin Brown a few weeks ago, is that the Kings had a very unsustainably high power play shooting percentage, and that has come back down to earth. It's impacting all of those guys. I think that there are better days ahead, but the Kings are not good enough. That I guess it's kind of like what we were talking about with the Rangers and the Devils earlier. They're going to have hot streaks. They're going to have cold streaks. That's what happens when you have a young team who, you know, beyond the Kopitar, Doughty, quick
core,
the Doughty quick core. Yeah, it's a young team that's learning quite a bit. So I wouldn't be losing, you know, total faith in Iafallo, but in shallower leagues, obviously, I don't think you need to hold on too much. Lewis, I want to talk about one more. This is, I guess, a cold streak. Carter Hart can't save a hockey puck anymore. He must have, I don't know, while the Flyers were on break, he must have not practiced enough at home, or I don't know, but he's been just awful. An .893 save percentage now on the season. He's actually ranked like in the 400 to 500s in my categories leagues. And another putrid performance on Tuesday, 5 goals against on 27 shots. Tonight, Brian Elliott got another start, and he didn't look great to start. 3 goals against in the first period against Pittsburgh tonight. Philadelphia's offense, though, you know, kind of showed up in the last 40 minutes, and Elliott didn't allow another goal the rest of the way, and Philadelphia pulled out the win. I don't, you know, they have a back-to-back coming up this weekend, so I would assume Brian Elliott gets 1 start. I would assume Carter Hart gets another. But Carter Hart at this point, I mean, if you drafted him, you took him in the top 5 or top 10 of goalies. If you got him in the top 15, you probably thought you were getting a huge steal. Instead, he's been more like a waiver wire, like replacement level guy. I'm wondering, you know, we haven't done a panic room segment in a while. What is your panic level on Carter Hart?
Man, it's tough, right? Because he's obviously the future. That's how they're looking at him. And he's really scuffling right now. I've got my panic meter at about a 5, and it's because the play has been bad and because Elliott has shown himself to be capable. I think, you know, worst case scenario, I think he gets into kind of a Dreger, Bobrovsky 50-50 kind of setup here. But, you know, it is obviously concerning. That's not why you drafted him. You hope that he was going to be playing at least 2/3 of the games, and he's just not been able to put it together this year. You know, so here's hoping, obviously, for my Hart owners out there, that he can shake this and get on a bit of a hot streak and elevate that season-long save percentage. But yeah, I mean, it's grim right now. Ever since I feel like that, I think the nadir was maybe that game, at Lake Tahoe, where he just didn't seem to be seeing the puck at all. And maybe he's in his head a little bit.
I think that makes sense. I think that the 5 makes sense too. If I were to give him a ranking, I would kind of split it up in the short term and the long term. Like in the short term, if I were looking at my waiver wire and Carter Hart were there, I might be willing to stash him because of the pedigree, but like, do I expect him to just be good suddenly? Like, no, I think he's probably got to work through something. So I think that Brian Elliott is probably worth a stash. Philadelphia, a playoff team, Elliott playing pretty well. They'll probably ride him until the wheels fall off, as they typically do when he gets a chance to start the majority of games. So that's probably the best advice I could give anyone. Maybe, I'm probably going to also tell you to hold on to Carter Hart unless he's absolutely murdering your fantasy team week after week and you need to start winning. Maybe then I could see dropping him, but the upside is so high. And if you can survive these tough weeks, I think that he will figure it out. And I think that you'll get a volume starter on a potential dark horse cup contender. So I'm with you. Hopefully we don't have to wait too long for Carter Hart to turn it around.
Get it together, Carter.
Lewis, that's all the time we have for tonight. Why don't you take us the rest of the way home?
Thank you, as always, for joining us and downloading our episode. Please be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at ShortShiftsKK. Brian and Elon, of course, can be found at the handle at Keeping Carlson. You can grab my opponent this week, Dave Betton of Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme. Better stream your heart out, Dave, if you want to have a chance this week. Visit the great sites we research our episodes with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, RotoWorld, Natural Stat Trick, and Cupful.com. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. And as always, until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.